Newman is the author of 11 books, including the novel Dope and Vodka and Cigarettes, and Not Shaving Her Legs at Roadside Press, 2026. He lives in Western Pennsylvania with his wife and writer, Lori Chiquila. Please welcome Dave Newman.
But I know the rest of the room, so thank you for Sean and Dan for recognizing this great day and night. I'm so happy to be on Roadside. I'm going to start with a poem from the little book. It's about retail sales, working retail sales. It's called Drinking and Drugging. He said, do you ever think that if you quit drinking and doing drugs and applied yourself, you'd be a lot better off in the world? I considered the question seriously. Because it's something I'd asked myself years before after graduating with a 4.0 GPA in a master's program. Then, after applying for 50 jobs, went to work as an industrial parts delivery man. It was a question I'd asked myself when I was a janitor, and when I was a box loader, and when I was a huffer for a moving company. It was a question I'd asked myself when I wrote my 23rd novel and sent it to an agent who said he couldn't sell it to a big New York house because it wasn't set in New York and none of the women cared about shoes. Basically, honestly, I wake up every morning and ask myself, what the fuck are you doing wrong? Because I want to do it right, but as far as I can tell, speaking as someone who doesn't watch TV or have many friends or basically sleep, drinking and drugging for recreation and the occasional answer to anxiety are the least of it. Though I wish for drink and drugs in enormous quantities when I attended the company annual meeting in Atlanta, and the CEO, a former Walmart higher-up who'd been mentored by Sam Walton, showed up on a horse. A real live fucking horse in a ballroom of a 4-fucking-star hotel, and took the stage with a microphone and proceeded to shout down individual employees over various infractions, from buying garbage cans to using too much tissue paper, until half the audience was in tears, and the country music act scheduled to perform later in the evening stepped out of the audience and presented the CEO with a signed guitar. What was the question? Do I ever think that if I quit drinking and doing drugs and applied myself, I'd be a lot better off in the world? No. This poem, the title is longer than the actual poem. It's called To the Woman in the Grocery Line Who Complains About the Man in Front of Us because he wears Nike shoes and pays for his groceries with food stamps. It is possible that he, like many intelligent consumers, bought the shoes on sale. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania in the 80s when all the industry was collapsing, the steel mills were gone, and the auto plant in town was closing, and this is about the men who were out of work at the time. This is called Our Fathers. Our fathers were broke and out of work and wore ties to interviews where they didn't know what to say to other men in ties who read How to Win Friends and Influence People and paid $100 for the self-improvement seminar down at the convention center. Our fathers skipped the convention center and dragged us to Three River Stadium to watch the Pirates get slammed in 9 innings. Our fathers tried to balance the checkbook in ways that allowed for 5 days at the beach and school clothes. Our fathers were alcoholics and heavy drinkers, born-again Christians and habitual liars. They worked as insurance salesmen, electricians, ambulance drivers, pharmaceutical sales reps, cooks and bartenders, store managers and line supervisors, factory grunts. They were former bar owners who'd lost bars to drink. They were wife beaters, great cheaters, teetotalers, big-time Catholics, Protestants who tithe. They shoveled snow from their neighbors' driveways when their neighbors turned too old to shovel snow. In interviews, our father said, well, I guess so, and shrugged at men with MBAs who asked, what are your strengths? Our fathers had more interviews for worse jobs, and still they went. Our fathers were ex-jocks who wanted football scholarships to big-time universities for their sons. They were high school graduates or GED certificate earners, trade school standouts, Army veterans who didn't talk. They threw hammers that whizzed by their children's heads, took off their belts to make a point, kicked ass from their favorite recliner, knew the difference between a punch and a backhand, and thought daily of choking their wives. And oh, how they loved us all. They loved us in the morning over coffee and silence, at night over beer, on the weekend with a job to do, the grass, the shrubs, the fence to paint. They loved us with homes made of bricks, backyards, balls, bats, shoes, endless groceries, new, used bicycles, a desire to get away, keys to cars with V8 engines, a neighborhood where you wouldn't get shot, and they said, go the fuck to school. And they said, go the fuck to school. Now they grow old and tired and mellow and say, I love you, and wait endlessly to be touched. Fathers, you have nothing to be ashamed of. You probably did not beat us enough. This is called the Poetry Prize. I wanted to tell you I'm writing in form. It's what poets do. They announce forms in case you don't notice them, which is to say you didn't praise the poet enough for writing in form. This line is about yay long. This line is a little longer than that line. Welcome to Fuckheadville. You really want to work here? I walked into his office and he said, outside. So I followed him out back to some dirt and some guys standing around and some other guys operating heavy machinery. He said, where's Mario? Did Mario fucking quit too? Apparently, quitting was a problem. I suspected low pay and bad working conditions. None of the guys standing around or operating heavy machinery answered. The rage in the air felt a lot like the rage in the air everywhere. The guy from the office said, you really want to work here? He fixed his hair like a barber made of electricity and bad drugs. I said, I do, which I didn't, which is what the world of money is about. He said, here you go then, and handed me a shovel. This book's mostly about poets that I love and praise, but this is not one of those. This is called Wordsworth. I get it. Nature is beautiful, and sometimes we all feel like our hearts are dancing with the daffodils. I sort of wish you'd been eaten by a bear. I'm going to finish with this poem. It's for my Bobby Page, who was the first poet, young person writing poems I've ever read. It's about Gerald Stern, who's one of my favorites. This is called Angels with Ugly Faces, with a cover of Gerald Stern.
Hey.
I can't remember if it was before or after I took you to Denny's bar for your 21st birthday, and you drank buttery nipples and large beers, while squeezed between old alcoholic men who downed large beers and short whiskeys and marveled at your enthusiasm. But you showed up in my apartment with a copy of the Red Crow you borrowed from the Carnegie Library, with Stern and his pal Jack Gilbert sharing the cover photo. One shot of them is old and ugly, and the other shot of them is young and ugly, and by ugly, I mean Stern. Jack Gilbert was as handsome as a movie star, and you were too, Bob, even as my face already started to collapse from reading and writing more than I slept. I was 24 and believed poetry was an element no different than oxygen or carbon, and at least as important as a ham sandwich for survival. So you were finally legal and hugged the whole bar, then stumbled back to my apartment like a man losing his legs. I tucked you in and kissed your beautiful forehead. I knew the blessing I found in your friendship, and it was more than the woman who was not my fiancée, who I flirted with all night and headed off to meet at 3 a.m. hoping to get laid. The Stern book was a miracle, how it put a mirror to our city and reflected back words we dreamed someday to write, even as we drove bridges, losing tension to old age, and walked hills that stole our breath. If we looked hard into our drinks and asked to be famous, allow me to apologize for our ignorant desires. I have a library at home the size of my old apartment, and we have drunk 5,000 beers in the 20 years since. The spring of 1995 looks like a wing now, and death has been longer coming than I imagined. So it is that two young men from Western Pennsylvania, with fathers stuck in factories, with UPS trucks, with mothers working in Walmart and public schools, who believe Pittsburgh more beautiful than Paris, came to find God inside a book of poems written by a man with a bulldog face who stumbled these same streets and flicked words like matches on paper as fine as hardwood. Bob, I hope I tell you I love you often enough. Bob, you puked on my sheets that night. I've always wanted to work that into a poem.